The ground shook not from natural disaster, but from the footsteps of gods. When titans and mortals warred, these cosmic battles defined our oldest stories of power and rebellion. This journey will reveal the hidden meanings behind these legendary conflicts, connecting ancient myths to the struggles we face today. You will uncover the secret reasons these tales have captivated humanity for thousands of years, and how they explain our deepest fears about chaos and control. What was the true cost of forging the world we know, and could the echoes of these divine wars still be felt in our modern lives? Where do you see the battle between order and chaos playing out in your own world? Before any gods or mortals could draw breath, the universe was a single, seething entity of pure potential. This was not a peaceful emptiness, but a roiling, chaotic void known to the Greeks as chaos and to the Norse as Gigantomachy, a yawning gap between the elemental realms of fire and ice. It was a canvas without form, a symphony of raw, conflicting forces waiting for a conductor. Out of this tumultuous nothingness, the first deities stirred into being. These were the protogenoi, the primordial gods, and they were not beings with human shapes or desires. They were the living embodiments of the cosmos itself. Gaia was the solid, unwavering earth. Ouranos was the vast, starry sky. Nyx was the profound and endless night. Their very emergence began the process of imposing order upon the formless. The union of earth and sky created the first boundaries, pinning the heavens above and anchoring the land below. This was the fundamental shift from chaos to cosmos, from undifferentiated potential to a world with rules, structure, and inevitably hierarchy. And with hierarchy comes the desire for control. The stage was now set, a world with a sky that could be held down and an earth that could be ruled over. But this new order, forged by the first gods, contained the seeds of its own destruction. What happens when the very foundations of the world decide they want to be free? The golden age of the Titans began with a single, brutal act. Cronus, now supreme ruler, had seized power by wounding his own father, casting the sky itself away from the earth. His reign was one of immense power and prosperity for the divine beings, a time when the world was young and ripe with potential. Yet this golden age was built on a foundation of deep, unspoken fear. Cronus could not forget the prophecy, the very words that had driven him to rebel. He had been warned that he, too, was destined to be overthrown by one of his own children. This knowledge festered in his heart, twisting his rule into a tyranny of paranoia. Every time his wife, the Titanomachy, presented him with a newborn child, he did not welcome them with love. Instead, he opened his mighty jaws and swallowed them whole, one by one. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon all were consumed, imprisoned within their father's divine belly. This was a perversion of the natural order, a desperate attempt to stop time itself. But time, like the cycle of rebellion, is an unstoppable force. Re, grief-stricken and furious, could not bear the loss of another child. When she was pregnant with her sixth, she devised a plan. She went to the island of Crete and in a hidden cave gave birth to a son she named Zeus. She then wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to Cronus, who, without a second thought, devoured the decoy. The true heir was safe, hidden away and raised in secret, nourished by the divine goat Amalthea and protected by the rhythmic, clashing sounds of the Curetes dancing to mask his cries. The stage was set for the second great cosmic war, a conflict that would not be a simple ambush, but a universe-shattering struggle for the very soul of creation. The son who had been saved would now return to challenge the father who had tried to destroy him. Re's grief hardened into a resolve as unyielding as the earth itself. She would not surrender another child to her husband's all-consuming fear. In her darkest hour, she turned for guidance to the very foundations of the world, her own parents, Gaia and Ouranos. They understood the cycles of power and rebellion better than any being, for they had both started and suffered from them. Together, they helped reweave a plan of ultimate deception, a scheme to use Cronus' own paranoia against him. When her time to give birth arrived, she journeyed in secret to a remote cave on the island of Crete. There, sheltered within the deep, hidden earth, her son Zeus was born. But this was only the first step. Re then took a simple, unassuming stone and wrapped it tightly in swaddling clothes, making it appear as a newborn babe. With a heart steeled by necessity, she returned to Cronus and presented the bundled stone. Consumed by his dread of the prophecy and never suspecting his wife's defiance, the Titan King snatched the offering and swallowed it whole, believing he had once again cheated destiny. He had, in fact, just sealed his own fate. The true heir was now safe, hidden far away, nourished by the divine goat Amalthea and protected by the rhythmic, clashing spears of the Curetes, whose frenzied dance masked the infant's cries from any who might be listening. This single act of maternal cunning shattered the stagnant order. It proved that a system built entirely on suppression and fear contains the very flaw that will cause its collapse. For 10 long years, the young god grew in strength and wisdom, nurtured by the primal forces his mother had rallied to his side, while his siblings remained trapped within the belly of their tyrant father, a living testament to his crimes. The stage was not just set for a war, it was now waiting for a liberator. Deep within the cave on Mount Ida, the infant god's cries were swallowed by the relentless, percussive rhythm of the Curetes' dance. This was not merely a hiding place, it was a forge. Here, far from the corrupting paranoia of his father's court, Zeus grew. He was nourished by the divine goat Amalthea, whose milk was the essence of raw power, and whose horn would later overflow with endless bounty. The very air he breathed was one of secrecy and potential. This secluded upbringing was the greatest advantage he could have possessed. While Cronus ruled through fear and consumption, Zeus was learning the contours of a different kind of power, one built on loyalty, cunning, and a burgeoning sense of justice. He was not shaped by the oppressive system he was born to overthrow, but formed in opposition to it. His first decisive act of this new order was one of liberation, not conquest. When he came of age, he sought out the Titanomachy, the embodiment of wisdom and cunning thought. Following her counsel, he secured a position within Cronus' own palace, disguised as a humble cupbearer. It was in this role of servitude that he saw his chance. He mixed a powerful potion into his father's drink, a draught so potent it targeted the very divinity within the Titan King. Cronus, in sudden, violent convulsion, did not just vomit, he disgorged the entirety of his tyranny. First came the stone, the symbol of his deception, and then, one by one, his children. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon emerged, fully grown and radiating with power, their spirits unbroken by years of imprisonment. They were free, and they looked to their younger brother, their savior, as their natural leader. The family was reunited, but the true battle for the cosmos was only just beginning. The liberation of the gods was the first strike in a war that would tear the universe apart. Freedom, however, is not the same as victory. Zeus now stood with his liberated siblings, a new generation of gods burning with righteous fury, but they faced the entrenched power of the Titans, a ruling class that had commanded the cosmos for ages. A direct assault would have been a swift path to annihilation. The young king of the gods understood that to win a war against the foundations of the world, he needed to fight with more than just passion. He needed an army, and he needed weapons that could shatter the very pillars of heaven. This strategic necessity drove Zeus to perform his most daring act yet, a descent into the ultimate prison. He traveled to the deepest, most lightless abyss of the universe, to the grim realm of Tartarus itself. There, bound in chains of adamant, he found the forgotten brothers of Cronus, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires. These were not titans in the same mold. The Cyclopes were master smiths, beings of immense creative and destructive power, while the Hecatoncheires were the hundred-handed ones, forces of sheer, unstoppable physical might. They had been imprisoned by their own brother out of fear, making them natural allies for any who opposed Cronus. Their release was a masterstroke. In gratitude for their freedom, the Cyclopes set to work at their divine forges. They did not craft simple swords or shields. They forged the very embodiments of cosmic authority. For Zeus, they created the thunderbolt, a concentrated spear of storm and sky. For Poseidon, they shaped the trident, a symbol of command over all the seas and the shifting earth. For Hades, they made the helmet of darkness, a shroud that granted its wearer utter invisibility. These were not mere weapons. They were instruments of domain, tools that focused the elemental power of the universe itself. This gathering of forces teaches a timeless lesson about rebellion. True power in a cosmic struggle comes not from a single strong leader, but from a united front of diverse allies, each bringing their unique strength to a common cause. With the fury of the Olympians, the craftsmanship of the Cyclopes, and the overwhelming force of the Hecatoncheires, the stage was no longer simply set for a fight. It was primed for a cataclysm that would decide the fate of all creation. For 10 brutal years, the cosmos echoed with the sounds of a war that would define eternity. This was the Titanomachy, a conflict so immense it pitted two mountains against each other. From Mount Othrys, the Titans, commanded by the mighty Atlas, projected their ancient authority. Across the world, the fires of rebellion burned on the slopes of Mount Olympus, where Zeus and his siblings gathered their diverse army. This was more than a simple family feud. It was a philosophical earthquake. The rigid, unchanging rule of the Titans was crashing against the dynamic, ambitious vision of the Olympians. The old god believed in a cosmos of fixed hierarchies where power was hoarded and time stood still. The new gods envisioned a world of cycles, of growth, of stories yet to be written. Every thunderbolt and every thrown boulder was an argument about the nature of existence itself. The Olympians' secret weapon, the hundred-handed Hecatoncheires, proved to be a tactical nightmare for the Titans. Imagine 3 giants, each with 100 arms, each arm capable of seizing a mountain peak and hurling it like a pebble. The sky itself grew dark with a relentless barrage of stone, a storm of geological fury that battered the Titan ranks without pause. And at the heart of the storm stood Zeus, the master of the thunderbolt. He did not merely throw lightning, he conducted it. Each bolt was a concentrated spear of pure celestial will, capable of cleaving a mountain in two or boiling an entire sea into a cloud of scalding vapor. The very earth became a casualty of this divine rage. Continents fractured, new islands were born from the shattered remains of old peaks, and the shorelines of the world were redrawn by tidal waves of unimaginable scale. This was the ultimate price of revolution, a total remaking of the landscape to match the new order struggling to be born. It shows us that to challenge the fundamental structure of a system, you must be prepared for that system to break apart entirely. Yet even with such overwhelming force, the war reached a bloody stalemate, a 10-year deadlock that threatened to tear the universe into permanent fragments. The outcome was still poised on a knife's edge, waiting for one final, decisive act to tip the scales forever. Yet even the thunderbolts of Zeus and the fury of his siblings were not enough to break the deadlock. The war demanded a new kind of terror, a force so alien and overwhelming it could shatter the unyielding confidence of the Titans. That force arrived in the form of the Hecatoncheires. Briareos, Cottus, and Gyges were not soldiers, they were walking cataclysms. With 50 heads each, they could see the entire battlefield in a single glance, and with 100 arms each, they did not merely throw rocks, they unleashed geological barrages. 300 boulders would fly through the air at once, a relentless, sky-darkening hail that crushed Titan ranks, shattered their fortifications, and turned the very ground beneath them into a shattered moonscape. Their intervention was psychological as much as physical. The Titans, beings of immense but structured power, had never confronted a form of warfare that was so utterly chaotic, so boundless in its violence. It was the raw, untamed fury of the earth itself, unleashed upon them. Alongside them fought the Cyclopes. Having forged the divine weapons, these master smiths now wielded their immense strength in direct combat, their single eyes blazing with the fire of their forges as they smashed into the Titan lines. This was the masterstroke of Zeus's strategy. He did not just want to match the Titans' power, he wanted to overwhelm it with forces they had deemed too monstrous, too chaotic, to ever be useful. The established order had imprisoned these beings, seeing them only as threats. The rebellion saw them as the key to liberation. This alliance between the disciplined order of the Olympians and the raw, primal chaos of their allies proved to be an unstoppable combination. It teaches us that profound change often requires embracing what the old system fears most, the wild, untapped power that lies forgotten in the dark. The thunderous clamor of battle had become a grim, unending rhythm. For 10 long years, the war ground on, a brutal stalemate that consumed the divine energy of both sides. The Olympians wielded their devastating weapons, but the Titans, entrenched on Mount Othrys, were woven into the very substance of the cosmos they had built. Their power was the foundation of the world itself, and they proved impossible to dislodge through force alone. Every lightning strike was met with an unyielding mountain, every charge repelled by the sheer, stubborn mass of the old order. This deadlock forced a profound strategic shift in the mind of Zeus. He saw that perseverance, while vital, was not enough. To win, they needed to adapt, to fight with wisdom as much as with wrath. The very nature of their rebellion had to evolve. This crossroads in the conflict mirrors a pivotal moment in any great struggle, when the initial plan fails and victory demands a new kind of thinking. It was no longer about matching the Titans' power, but about outmaneuvering their ancient, rigid understanding of warfare. The gods needed a masterstroke, a plan that leveraged their unique alliance in a way the old rulers could never foresee. The next phase of the war would be won not by the loudest thunder, but by the quietest, most cunning calculation. The final victory was sealed not with a final blow, but with a banishment that would echo through eternity. Having broken the Titan ranks, the Olympians faced a monumental question. What do you do with gods you cannot kill, whose very essence is woven into the fabric of the world? Exile was the only answer, but this would be an exile unlike any other. The defeated Titans were dragged from the battlefield, their ancient power bound, and cast down into the absolute depths of the cosmos. Their destination was Tartarus, the primordial pit of torment. This was not a simple prison cell, it was an ontological reversal. Tartarus existed as far beneath the realm of Hades as the earth lay beneath the sky, a place of such profound emptiness that it was less a location and more a state of non-being. Its gates were forged from unbreakable bronze, and its walls were built from the very darkness that predated creation itself. Here, the Titans would not merely be jailed, they would be erased from the functioning universe, their influence permanently severed from the world above. But Zeus, learning from the mistakes of his father, knew that walls alone could not hold such power. He needed a warden that embodied absolute, overwhelming force. And so, in a move of brilliant and cruel irony, he appointed the Hecatoncheires as the eternal guards. The very monsters whose chaotic power had won the war were now tasked with enforcing the new order's most rigid boundary. Briareos, Cottus, and Gyges, with their 100 hands and 50 heads each, became the living locks on the prison door, a perpetual, watchful terror ensuring that the old gods would never again see the light of the stars. This act completed the revolution. It transformed a military triumph into a lasting cosmic settlement, establishing a divine justice system where rebellion was met not just with defeat, but with infinite containment. The age of the Titans was over, not just ended, but entombed, and high above, on the slopes of a new Mount Olympus, the victorious gods could finally turn their attention from war to the monumental task of building a world in their own image. A new cosmic government now took shape high atop Mount Olympus. With the Titans confined to their lightless prison, the three victorious brothers faced the monumental task of dividing the universe. They chose a method as ancient as fate itself, the drawing of lots. Each god reached into the vessel, and the destiny of all creation was decided by simple chance. Zeus drew the vast, open sky, a domain of storms and daylight that perfectly suited his role as king and commander. Poseidon's lot granted him the endless, churning seas, all rivers, and the very earth that shakes. And Hades, with his solemn prize, became the lord of the underworld, the unseen ruler of the dead and the riches that lie deep beneath the soil. The earth itself and the peak of Olympus were declared neutral territory, a shared space for the entire pantheon. This was far more than a simple redistribution of spoils. It was the establishment of the first true bureaucracy, a divine system of checks and balances. Power was no longer concentrated in a single, paranoid tyrant like Cronus. Instead, it was distributed across a council of specialized rulers, each a master of their own realm, yet bound by the overarching authority of Zeus. This new order promised a stability the world had never known, a framework for the epic stories of heroes and monsters that were yet to come. The raw chaos of the war had been channeled into a structure, a cosmic constitution that defined how gods would interact with each other and with the mortals who would soon walk the earth. Yet this very structure, for all its promise of order, contained the seeds of future drama. A council of gods, each with their own domain and pride, would never be a truly peaceful gathering. The age of open war was over, but the age of divine politics, romantic entanglements, and legendary quests was just beginning. Yet even this carefully balanced order faced an immediate and terrifying challenge. The earth itself seemed to rise up against the new rulers of the cosmos. From the blood of the mutilated Ouranos, which had soaked deep into the soil of Gaia, a new race of horrors was born. These were the giants, and they were not like the Titans. Where the Titans were ancient and divine, the giants were monstrous, immense beings with serpentine legs and a fury that shook the very mountains. Their birth was an act of pure vengeance, orchestrated by a grieving Gaia, who sought to punish the Olympians for the brutal imprisonment of her Titan children. This new war, the Gigantomachy, was a direct continuation of the cosmic struggle, but with a terrifying new rule. A prophecy decreed that these beings, born from the primal earth, could not be killed by a god alone. Their demise required the combined strength of a god and a mortal hero. This single stipulation changed everything. It meant the survival of the new divine order, now hinged on a partnership with humanity. The giants, in their rage, began a literal assault on the heavens. They piled mountain upon mountain, stacking Ossa upon Pelion, in a desperate, brute force attempt to scale the walls of Olympus and tear the gods from their thrones. This was more than a battle. It was a symbolic war between the structured civilization of the Olympians and the raw, untamed chaos of the natural world. The gods, for all their thunderbolts and tridents, were suddenly vulnerable. They were forced to look down from their celestial home and seek help from the very mortals they had so recently ignored. The fate of the universe now rested on the strength of a single human hand fighting beside a divine one, and so the gods looked to the earth for their salvation. In the midst of the celestial chaos, one figure stood apart, a man whose very name meant the glory of Hera. This was Heracles, a son of Zeus born of a mortal woman, and he was the living key to the prophecy. His participation was not a supporting role in a divine drama. It was the absolute linchpin of the entire Olympian strategy. The giants, born from the ancient earth, could only be felled by a combination of immortal power and mortal essence. Heracles, in his unique and tragic being, was that perfect fusion. He possessed a strength that could challenge the foundations of the world, a power earned through his legendary labors, yet he remained fundamentally human, subject to pain, emotion, and a finite lifespan. This duality made him the only weapon sharp enough to cut down the new threat. On the battlefield, he fought not as a servant to the gods, but as their essential partner. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Apollo, with Athena, with his own father Zeus. When the giant Alcyoneus proved immortal on his native soil, it was Heracles who, with strategic cunning, dragged the monstrous being across a border, severing his connection to the land and making him vulnerable to a final, crushing blow. When the king of the giants, Porphyrion, turned his lustful gaze upon the goddess Hera, it was a well-aimed arrow from Heracles' bow that struck him down, an arrow whose tip was steeped in the venomous blood of the Lernaean Hydra. That poison, harvested during one of his mortal trials, became the ultimate equalizer against beings of divine origin. This collaboration marked a profound shift in the cosmic hierarchy. Humanity was no longer just a passive creation, subject to the whims of the gods. In that moment, a mortal man became an active, indispensable defender of the universal order. The fate of the heavens was not just decided on Olympus, but in the heart and sinew of a hero. Heracles' role demonstrates that the most potent power in the universe can be a hybrid, a blend of celestial might and human spirit. Destiny, it seems, often requires the unique strengths of both realms to be truly fulfilled. The age of mortals had truly begun, not with a whimper, but with the triumphant twang of a hero's bowstring. Far to the north, in the frozen halls of Norse myth, a different kind of divine war was fought. This was not a rebellion of children against a father, but a clash of cultures between two distinct tribes of gods. On one side stood the Aesir, the gods of sky, war, and governance, led by the likes of Odin and Thor. On the other were the Vanir, deities of earth, fertility, magic, and prosperity. Their conflict, the Aesir-Vanir War, began not with a prophecy of overthrow, but with an act of profound disrespect. The Aesir, suspicious of the Vanir's different customs and their potent magic known as Satyr, invited the Vanir goddess Gullveig to their hall. But instead of hospitality, they subjected her to a terrible ordeal, repeatedly piercing her with spears and attempting to burn her in a great fire. Yet 3 times they tried, and 3 times she was reborn from the ashes, her power undiminished. This violation was the spark. The Vanir, justly enraged, declared war. The battle that followed was unlike the Titanomachy. It was not a straightforward test of brute strength, but a confusing and protracted struggle where conventional warfare blended with powerful sorcery. Both sides were masters of Satyr, a form of magic that could twist fate, bewitch the mind, and curse the land itself. The lines between warrior and sorcerer blurred, and for a long time, neither tribe could gain a decisive upper hand. The war dragged on, draining both sides until a profound weariness set in. They realized that total victory was an illusion, and that continued conflict would only lead to mutual ruin. So they chose a different path. They laid down their weapons and negotiated a truce. To seal their peace, they performed a ritual of profound unity. Each god spat into a great cauldron, and from that mingled spittle, they created a new being, Kvasir. He was the wisest of all, born from the collective essence of both tribes, a living symbol of their reconciliation. This was more than a simple ceasefire, it was a full integration. The Aesir and Vanir exchanged hostages not as prisoners, but as honored guests to ensure lasting peace. Key Vanir gods, including the wise Njord and his magnificent children, Freyr and Freyja, came to live in Asgard, the realm of the Aesir. In return, the Aesir sent Honir and Mimir to the Vanir. This cultural exchange strengthened the entire pantheon, blending the Aesir's authority with the Vanir's fertile magic. Where the Greek solution was banishment and rigid order, the Norse answer was synthesis and alliance. They understood that true strength could be found not in annihilating the other, but in weaving opposing forces into a stronger, more complex whole. The cosmos, it seems, offers more than one blueprint for peace after a divine war. But this hard-won peace in the Norse cosmos was always temporary. The Aesir and Vanir built their alliance knowing it was set against a ticking clock, a prophecy of total annihilation called Ragnarok. This is the twilight of the gods, a war not for control, but for the end of everything. Where the Greek conflicts established a permanent order, Ragnarok accepts that all orders, even divine ones, have an expiration date. It is a battle destined to be lost, a final, glorious confrontation with fate itself. The enemies are not outsiders, but forces the gods themselves helped to create. There is Loki, the trickster, once a blood brother to Odin, now the captain of chaos. There are his monstrous children, bound by the gods out of fear, the wolf Fenrir, the world serpent Jormungandr, and Hel, the ruler of the dishonored dead. And there are the frost giants, the primordial enemies, all marching together under a banner of vengeance. The signs of its coming are unmistakable. The world will be gripped by Fimbulwinter, 3 years of endless, brutal cold with no summer in between. The sun and moon will be swallowed by celestial wolves, plunging the earth into darkness. Morality will crumble, brother will turn against brother, and all bonds of kinship will shatter. The gods, reading these omens, do not hide. They prepare for a battle they know will be their last. Odin gathers the greatest slain warriors from his hall of Valhalla, building an army of the dead for a war that cannot be won. This is not a failure of strategy, but a profound acceptance of destiny. The Norse gods face their end with a courage that is almost beyond comprehension, choosing to meet their doom head-on rather than beg for a mercy the universe will not provide. The battle itself is a series of fated, tragic duels. Odin, the All-Father, is devoured by the wolf Fenrir, a beast he once tried to chain. Thor, the protector of mankind, slays the monstrous Jormungandr, the serpent that encircles the world, only to take 9 steps and fall dead from the creature's venom. Tyr, the god of law and justice, who sacrificed his hand to bind the wolf, fights and is killed by the hound Garm, a creature from the gates of hell itself. Even the traitor Loki and the god Heimdall, the vigilant watchman, slay each other in a final, bitter struggle. The fire giant Surt then engulfs the 9 worlds in cleansing flame, and the earth, scorched and broken, sinks beneath the waves. There are no survivors, there is only silence and water, yet this is not the final word. From the total destruction, a new world emerges, green and fertile, rising from the sea. A new sun, the daughter of the Old One, warms the land. A handful of gods survive the inferno, including Odin's son Vidar and Thor's sons Modi and Magni. They inherit a peaceful world, and they find in the grass the golden game pieces the Aesir once played with, a symbol of the past's enduring legacy. Even 2 humans, hidden deep within the world tree Yggdrasil during the cataclysm, emerge to repopulate the earth. Ragnarok is the ultimate expression of a cyclical universe. It teaches that destruction is not an aberration, but a necessary, regenerative part of existence. The end of all things is also, always, a beginning. These cosmic wars were never just about power. They were a profound argument about the nature of reality itself, a philosophical battle between cosmos and chaos. The Olympians championed a universe of laws, justice, and predictable cycles. They built a celestial government, a world where oaths mattered and destinies could be foreseen. This was cosmos, the Greek word for an ordered and harmonious system. Arrayed against them were the Titans and the Giants, embodiments of the primordial chaos from which the world was born. They were the untamed earthquake, the volcanic fury, the raw, mindless power of a nature that does not care for reason or rules. Every lightning bolt Zeus hurled was not merely an attack, it was a statement. It declared that the wild, churning void would be subdued by structure. This struggle gave our ancestors a framework for understanding their own fragile existence. A sudden plague, a devastating flood, or the fall of a kingdom was not a random accident. It was a momentary breach in the divine order, a flicker of the ancient chaos breaking through the walls of civilization. These myths taught that society is not a default state. It is a hard-won achievement, a garden that must be constantly tended against the ever-encroaching wilderness. The gods themselves had to fight for it, and so must we. This cosmic tension mirrors the most intimate human experience, the constant internal conflict between our rational mind and our primal impulses. That sudden surge of anger, that irrational fear, that deep, dark desire, these are the titans and giants within our own psyche. The legendary battles are a grand metaphor for our daily choice to build rather than destroy, to create order from the chaos of our own emotions. The war is never truly over because the void is always there, waiting just beyond the firelight. Even the thunderbolts of Zeus could not shatter the loom of fate. This inescapable cosmic design is the silent architect behind every legendary war, a thread woven so deeply into the fabric of these stories that the gods themselves cannot pull it free. It begins with the original sin of the cosmos. Ouranos received a prophecy that he would be overthrown by his own son, and that knowledge dictated his every tyrannical action. He tried to bury his children deep within the earth, but his attempt to cheat destiny only ensured its fulfillment. His son Cronus, now king, heard the same terrible echo from the fates. He, too, was destined to fall to his own child, so he swallowed them one after another, believing that by destroying the pieces of the future, he could prevent the future itself. His resistance was not just an act of cruelty, it was a futile battle against the current of time, and in that desperation, he created the very circumstances that would lead to his downfall. Zeus, by contrast, was a master of working within fate's boundaries. He did not ignore the prophecies, he used them. He sought out Metis for her wisdom, he freed his siblings to build his army, and he liberated the Cyclopes to forge the weapons that destiny demanded he wield. His success was not about breaking the rules of the cosmos, but about understanding them better than his father. He navigated the river of fate while Cronus tried to dam it and was inevitably swept away. This dynamic plays out with chilling finality in the Norse sagas. The three Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, sit at the base of the world tree Yggdrasil, weaving the tapestry of destiny for gods and mortals alike. They represent what was, what is, and what shall be. Odin, the All-Father, is the ultimate example of a god straining against this design. He hangs himself from the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, in a shamanistic ritual to gain the knowledge of the runes. He gives up his eye for a drink from the well of wisdom, all in a desperate attempt to see the threads of fate more clearly. He is not trying to change the outcome of Ragnarok. He knows that is impossible. He is trying to understand it, to prepare for it, to ensure that something survives the coming twilight. His quest is not for victory, but for meaning in the face of an inevitable end. This profound respect for Moira in Greece and Weird in the Norse world provided a crucial framework. It suggested that even the most senseless-seeming chaos, the most brutal wars, had a place in a grand, if mysterious, cosmic order. The acceptance of this reality becomes the mark of true wisdom. For the gods, fighting fate is the path to tyranny and self-destruction, while understanding it is the path to a noble, if tragic, reign. This ancient theme forces a haunting question upon us. If the gods themselves are bound by a script they did not write, what does that say about our own lives? Are our choices truly our own, or are we, too, simply playing out a part in a story whose final chapter was written long ago? The ground beneath their feet was not solid, but a stage for celestial violence. For the mortals living through the Titanomachy, the War of the Gods was not a distant legend. It was a terrifying, daily reality. They did not see Zeus hurling his thunderbolts or the Hecatoncheires throwing mountains. They felt the earth crack open without warning, swallowing entire villages. They watched as the sea rose up in furious waves to devour the coastline, and they breathed air thick with ash from mountains that had suddenly begun to spit fire. These were not random natural disasters to them. They were the visible, physical symptoms of a war being fought in a realm just beyond their sight. The poet Hesiod recorded these cataclysms not as geology, but as theology. A violent earthquake was not the shifting of tectonic plates, it was a tremor from a titan's fall. A thunderstorm of unprecedented fury was not a weather pattern, it was the echo of a divine argument. These stories were the ancient world's first science, offering an explanation for the terrifying and ungovernable forces of nature. They transformed a chaotic, meaningless event into a story with a cause and an effect. The world's violence now had a reason, and that reason was the struggle of gods. This narrative did more than just explain the world, it justified a new social and religious order. The triumph of the Olympians was not just a change in management on a cosmic scale. For humanity, it meant the establishment of a pantheon that valued justice, law, and oaths, however imperfectly. Worshipping Zeus and his siblings was not merely an act of faith. It was a pragmatic allegiance to the powers who had subdued the primordial chaos that constantly threatened to break through. They were the administrators of a hard-won peace, and honoring them was a way to help maintain that fragile order. This perspective also gave ordinary people a role in the cosmos. The legend of Heracles fighting alongside the gods was a profound source of hope and connection. It suggested that humanity was not just a passive audience to divine drama. A mortal, through immense courage and strength, could actually influence the fate of the universe. This idea elevated the human experience from one of mere suffering to one of potential partnership. Every time our ancestors looked at a rugged mountain range or a jagged coastline, they did not see random erosion. They saw the permanent scars of a cosmic war, a landscape inscribed with divine history. Their fear of the unknown was gradually replaced by a sense of awe, a feeling that they were living in a world that had been fought for and won. The chasm between the human and the divine was bridged not by a ladder, but by a story. Could the earth itself remember these wars? The ground beneath the ancient Greeks and Norsemen might have held more than just the bones of giants. It might have held the raw material of the stories themselves. An intriguing question persists. Are these myths purely imaginative, or could they be distorted cultural memories of real, catastrophic events? Some scholars propose that the Titanomachy, with its world-shaking violence, could echo a collective memory of immense volcanic eruptions. Picture an event like the Thara eruption around 1600 BCE, a cataclysm that utterly devastated the Minoan civilization. The explosion was so colossal it would have been a generation-defining trauma, witnessed by people hundreds of miles away. The poetic descriptions of the world shaking, the sky darkening with ash, and the sea seeming to boil could be direct, albeit mythologized, accounts of such a geological nightmare. The gods throwing mountains and the earth cracking open take on a terrifying new literalism when viewed through this lens. Similarly, the global flood myths that often accompany cosmic resets, like the one that follows Ragnarok, could be ancient folk memories of post-glacial sea level rise. As the last ice age receded, vast quantities of meltwater raised ocean levels, swallowing coastlines and drowning entire landscapes that early humans had known for generations. That slow, inexorable creep of water would have felt like a divine judgment, a cleansing flood sent by the gods to wash away an old world and make way for a new one. While we cannot draw a direct, provable line from a specific volcano to a specific titan, this perspective invites a powerful shift in how we view mythology. It asks us to see these stories not as false history, but as a profound human response to real, traumatic events, encoded in the only language powerful enough to contain them, the language of gods and monsters. The epic battles of legend may be the way our ancestors processed the unimaginable, translating the terrifying power of their world into a narrative they could understand and ultimately survive. This lens does not diminish the myths, it grounds their cosmic scale in a chilling layer of historical plausibility. The thunder of Zeus might just be the distant, amplified memory of a mountain tearing itself apart. The thunderbolt was more than a weapon in Zeus's hand. It was the physical expression of his will. When he raised his arm, the sky did not merely produce a flash of light, it delivered a verdict. This was not random atmospheric discharge. It was the ultimate instrument of justice, a power so immediate and absolute it could end any argument. It represented his complete sovereignty over the air, the storms, and the very concept of celestial order. His command was as instantaneous and undeniable as the crack of lightning itself. This tool of instantaneous power stood in stark contrast to the instrument wielded by his brother. Poseidon's trident was a scepter for the seas. With a single thrust, he could stir the ocean floor, summoning tsunamis that could erase coastal cities from the map. Yet with another gesture, he could calm the fiercest waves, creating pathways for ships and granting safe harbor. The trident embodied the dual nature of the sea itself, a force of both nurturing creation and utter destruction, all subject to the gods' unpredictable temper. It was not a weapon for a single, decisive strike, but a tool for ongoing, tumultuous command over an entire elemental domain. Then there was the power of the unseen. Hades did not wield a weapon of flashy destruction. His was the helm of darkness, a shroud that granted perfect invisibility. This artifact was a perfect symbol for his role as Lord of the Underworld. His authority was not exercised in the bright light of day, but in the hidden, silent realms of the dead, the secrets buried deep within the earth, and the unseen riches that mortals could only dream of. His power lay in what was unknown, feared, and ultimately inevitable. These objects crystallized the abstract authority of the gods into something tangible and terrifying. They were the ultimate symbols of office, the divine regalia that legitimized their rule. A king might have a crown, but Zeus had the thunderbolt. This demonstrated that in the cosmic order, authority was not just declared, it was demonstrated through a unique and overwhelming instrument. The very origin of these artifacts deepens their meaning. They were not born with the Olympians, but forged for them by the Cyclopes, beings of primal fire and craft who had been imprisoned by the old order. This act tied the symbols of the new regime directly back to the raw, untamed materials of the primordial world. The thunderbolt was not just sky power, it was elemental fire and fury given a specific, disciplined purpose. The new gods did not invent their authority from nothing. They harnessed the chaos of the old world and reforged it into the tools of their governance. To understand these symbols is to read a secret language within the myths. Every time Zeus hurls his lightning, it is not just an attack, it is a reaffirmation of his right to rule. Every earthquake caused by Poseidon's trident is a reminder of his volatile domain, and the silent, unseen presence of Hades' helm speaks to the power that waits for all, an authority that requires no spectacle, only patience. These legendary artifacts show us that true power is not just about strength, but about the unique and defining instrument through which that strength is channeled and understood. Yet the line between a heroic partner and a prideful rebel was perilously thin. After the Gigantomachy, a new and deeply personal kind of conflict emerged, one where mortals dared to challenge the gods directly. This was Titanomachy, a struggle not for cosmic control but for personal glory, and it almost always ended in divine retribution. Consider the story of the Lydian weaver Arachne. She was not a warrior, but an artist of such sublime skill that even the nymphs would gather to watch her work. She boldly claimed that her talent surpassed that of the goddess Athena herself. When the Olympian appeared, disguised as an old woman, to offer a chance for humility, Arachne refused to recant, so the contest began. Athena wove a tapestry depicting the glorious, punishing victories of the gods over impious mortals, a clear warning. Arachne, in defiance, wove a masterpiece showing the gods' deceptions and indiscretions, their seductions of mortal women in vivid, embarrassing detail. The work was technically flawless, a perfect insult. Enraged by both the skill and the subject, Athena tore the tapestry to shreds and struck Arachne on the head. Overcome with shame and fury, the mortal woman tried to hang herself, but the goddess did not grant her the peace of death. Instead, she transformed Arachne into a spider, condemning her and all her descendants to dangle from a thread and weave for all eternity. This was not a battle of strength but of pride. Arachne's sin was not her skill but her hubris, her refusal to acknowledge the divine source of all mortal gifts. Her punishment was a cruel mockery of her own ambition, eternally repeating her craft as a lowly insect. A similar fate met the great hunter Orion, whose boast was not artistic but physical. He declared he would hunt down and kill every single beast on the face of the earth. This was not a hero's quest, but an act of ecological annihilation, a direct threat to the natural order presided over by the gods. In response, the earth itself, Gaia, sent a tiny scorpion to sting the giant on his heel. Orion, for all his size and strength, fell dead, his overwhelming power useless against a creature born from the very world he sought to dominate. Both stories serve as stark reminders of the hierarchy cemented after the Great Wars. They teach that while the gods could welcome mortal aid in a cosmic crisis, they would not tolerate a direct assault on their dignity or their domains. This creates a profound tension in the ancient worldview. On one hand, you have the Promethean spirit, the drive to innovate, to strive, to bring fire and knowledge to humanity. On the other, you have the warning of Arachne, a caution that too much pride, too much ambition leads to a devastating fall. The message was clear: know your place. Heroism was celebrated within the bounds of servitude to the divine will, but any claim of equality was the highest form of folly. The cosmic order, it seemed, had very little room for mortal vanity. This struggle between order and its discontents echoes across the world. In the ancient hymns of India, we find a cosmic conflict just as fundamental as the Titanomachy, a perpetual war between the Devas and the Asuras. The Devas are the gods of light, order, and celestial law, while the Asuras are their shadowy counterparts, powerful beings of chaos, magic, and ambition. Their war is not a single, decisive event, but an eternal cycle of battle, truce, and resurgence, fought over the ultimate prize, the nectar of immortality known as Amrita. The stories in the Puranas describe battles of staggering scale, where gods and demons wield celestial weapons called astras, each one a manifestation of a specific elemental or divine power. These are not simple swords and spears, but mantras given physical form, projectiles of fire, wind, or irresistible force that can level mountains and boil oceans. The conflict reaches its zenith during the legendary churning of the cosmic ocean, a monumental undertaking where the Devas and Asuras temporarily unite, using a massive mountain as a churn and a great serpent as a rope to extract the Amrita from the depths of reality itself. This grand collaboration, however, quickly shatters into betrayal and conflict the moment the elixir is obtained, proving that the tension between these opposing forces is the engine of the universe itself, a necessary dynamic that can be harnessed but never truly resolved. Far to the west, in the river valleys of Mesopotamia, a different creation story carries the same violent theme. The Enuma Elish tells of a time before time, when only the sweet waters of Apsu and the salt waters of the primordial sea, Tiamat, existed. From their union, generations of younger gods were born, but their noise and energy disturbed the ancient stillness of Tiamat. She decided to destroy her own children, morphing from a creatrix into a terrifying, draconic monster of chaos. The pantheon was thrown into panic until the young storm god Marduk stepped forward. He agreed to face Tiamat, but on one condition, that he be granted supreme and unchallenged kingship over all the gods if he succeeded. His demand was met, and he rode out to meet the primordial mother. The battle was a cataclysm of wind and weaponry. Marduk ensnared Tiamat in a net, drove an evil wind into her gaping mouth to distend her body, and then, with a single cosmic stroke, shot an arrow that split her in two. From one half of her body, he fashioned the dome of the heavens, and from the other, he anchored the solid earth. Her roaring waters were tamed into the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, and from the blood of her slain commander, Kingu, humanity was created to serve the gods. Here, the pattern is unmistakable. A primordial, often maternal, force of undifferentiated chaos is challenged and violently dismantled by a younger, more structured god. The old, fluid world must be killed and its body partitioned to create the new, stable world of defined boundaries, laws, and hierarchies. This is not a Greek or a Norse or a Mesopotamian idea. It is a human one. These cultures, separated by vast continents and centuries, all instinctively explain the terrifying process of creation through the metaphor of a cosmic war. They looked at the world around them, a place of both breathtaking order and devastating natural fury, and saw the lasting scars of a divine battlefield. The human mind, grappling with the profound questions of where we came from and why the world is the way it is, consistently arrived at the same powerful answer: that our universe was forged in conflict, and that the struggle between chaos and order is the very price of existence. Our own minds are the ultimate cosmic battlefield. While the gods fought with thunder and mountains, we wage a similar war in the quiet spaces of our thoughts. The titans and giants are not just ancient monsters, they are living forces within us. That sudden, overwhelming surge of rage when you are cut off in traffic, that is the fire of a titan. The gnawing, irrational fear that holds you back from a risk, that is the whisper of a giant born from the dark earth of your own anxieties. These are our primal instincts, the raw, chaotic emotions that surge up from a place deeper than reason. They are powerful, essential even, but left unchecked, they can lay waste to our inner world just as the Titans sought to shatter the cosmos. The Olympian gods represent a different kind of power, the conscious mind striving for order. Your ability to take a deep breath and let that rage subside, that is Zeus imposing celestial law. Your decision to face a fear with careful planning, that is Athena bringing strategic wisdom to the front lines. The daily choice to get out of bed and build a life of structure and purpose, that is the entire pantheon working in concert to cultivate a civilized psyche from the wilderness of impulse. This internal conflict is a lifelong titanomachy, the ego's constant effort to integrate these warring factions without letting any one of them seize total control. The psychologist Carl Jung saw these mythical figures not as external deities, but as universal archetypes, fundamental patterns of human experience that play out in the theater of our own souls. When you manage to pause before sending an angry email, you are not just being polite, you are performing a personal ritual of immense significance. You are slaying a miniature hydra, or binding a destructive titan like unchecked wrath and casting it into the inner Tartarus of your subconscious. This is the true, enduring magic of these stories. They give us a language and a framework for understanding our own complexities. The quest for self-mastery is a hero's journey inward, a process Jung called individuation, where we work to acknowledge and harmonize all the warring parts of ourselves. The next time you feel a storm of emotion brewing within, remember that you are standing on a mythical battlefield. Your choices in those moments are the modern echoes of the greatest war ever told. The timeless struggle between creation and annihilation did not end with the fall of the Titans. It simply found a new stage in the pages of our books and the glow of our screens. J.R.R. Tolkien, a scholar of ancient languages, wove the Titanomachy directly into the very foundations of Middle-earth. His Dark Lord Morgoth is not merely a villain, he is a divine rebel, a valor who turns against the Creator's song to mar the world with his own discordant themes. His war against the elves and men is a battle for the soul of creation itself, a direct echo of the Greek gods fighting to defend their nascent cosmos from a primordial, destructive force. Sauron, his lieutenant, continues this cosmic insurgency, a lingering echo of the ancient evil that refuses to be fully extinguished, much like the imprisoned titans waiting in Tartarus. This is not a simple battle of good versus evil, but a conflict over the fundamental nature of reality, a theme as old as myth itself. In our contemporary pantheon, the Avengers assemble to face a threat of similar scale. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga presents Thanos as a chillingly modern titan, a being who believes his brutal solution of universal genocide is a necessary, even merciful, form of order. He is not chaos incarnate, but order taken to a monstrous, logical extreme, a parallel to Cronus who consumed his children to prevent a prophesied downfall. The superheroes who oppose him are a new breed of Olympians, each with a unique domain. Captain America embodies justice, Iron Man represents cunning intellect, and Thor commands the very lightning. Their final, devastating battle is a Gigantomachy for the 21st century, a last stand to defend not just a planet, but the principle of free will against a single, imposing will. These stories resonate so deeply because they are asking the same questions the ancients did. What is the price of order? When is rebellion justified? What are we willing to sacrifice to protect our world? The costumes change, the special effects grow more spectacular, but the core narrative remains. We are still captivated by the moment when cosmic power descends, and ordinary beings must find the courage to become legends. The thunderbolts may be repainted as repulsor beams, but the war they fight is eternal. Even the most established myths were once fluid and contested. Beyond the familiar epics of Hesiod and Homer lies a labyrinth of forgotten traditions, where the stories we think we know transform into something entirely different. Consider the secretive Orphic mysteries. In their haunting hymns, the Titanomachy is not a simple victory of new gods over old. Instead, after defeating Cronus, Zeus does not banish or imprison the primordial essence of the universe. He seeks out the first ruler, a deity of light named Phanes, the one who emerged from the cosmic egg. In a profound act of cosmic unity, Zeus absorbs Phanes entirely, consuming this progenitor god to become a more complete and universal sovereign. He becomes the totality of existence, containing both the old order and the new within his own being. This is not a story of overthrow, but of integration, suggesting that true power lies not in destruction, but in a harmonious synthesis of all that came before. This radical reinterpretation forces us to wonder how many other versions of this celestial war have been lost to time. The legendary burning of the Library of Alexandria was not just the destruction of scrolls, it was the silencing of countless voices. Within its ashes may have been epic poems that sided with the Titans, or regional chronicles that told of a peace treaty between Cronus and Zeus, narratives that would fundamentally alter our understanding of this foundational conflict. The Mediterranean world was a chorus of different beliefs, not a single song. The Etruscans and the Phoenicians would have heard the Greek tales through their own cultural lens, perhaps casting the Titans not as monstrous oppressors but as tragic heroes, the rightful rulers unjustly displaced by an upstart pantheon. This fluidity is perfectly captured in the evolving figure of Cronus himself. The same deity the Greeks feared as a paranoid child eater was revered by the Romans as Saturn, a benevolent king who presided over a lost golden age of peace, abundance, and equality. In his Roman guise, his castration of Ouranos was seen not as an act of brutal violence, but as the necessary liberation of the earth from the oppressive weight of the sky. His festival, the Saturnalia, turned the social order upside down, with masters serving their slaves in a temporary return to that age of harmony. How could one god embody two such opposing natures? The answer lies in understanding that mythology was never a fixed doctrine. It was a living, breathing dialogue, a tapestry woven from countless local threads, each community emphasizing the parts of the story that resonated with their own values, fears, and hopes. The silence left by these lost stories is not an empty void but an invitation. It asks us to become co-creators, to fill the gaps with our own imagination, and to ponder which version of the myth feels most true. The real power of these ancient battles may not lie in a single, authoritative version, but in their endless capacity to be reimagined, generation after generation. These legendary wars are the bedrock of our deepest stories. They are not mere entertainment, but profound explorations of the painful cycles that shape all of existence, from the death of a single idea to the rebirth of an entire world. Each uprising, from the fall of Ouranos to the twilight of the Norse gods, carries a timeless lesson about the steep price of power and the undeniable truth that all things must change. These myths do not promise a permanent peace. Instead, they show us that order is a fragile construction, a garden that demands constant tending against the relentless weeds of chaos. The courage to face that chaos in all its terrifying forms is the very essence of the hero's journey, whether that hero is a god, a mortal, or simply a person trying to live a good life. As we confront our own modern titans, the forces of upheaval in our societies and within our own minds, these ancient narratives offer a strange comfort. They remind us that the struggle between the old ways and the new, between the safety of tradition and the spark of innovation, is a fundamental rhythm of the universe. The balance of the cosmos is not a static state, but a dynamic and endless negotiation. So let these echoes of divine battles inspire your own reflections. What are the giants you must face? Where do you see the battle between order and chaos playing out in your world? If these stories of cosmic conflict have stirred something within you, we would love to hear your thoughts. Share the myth that resonates most deeply with you in the comments below, and subscribe to join us as we continue to unravel the great mysteries of our past.